Welcome, dear listener, to the Sleeping Hourglass. Tonight, we step into a world of river mist and quiet footsteps, following the brief yet radiant life of Pocahontas, a woman who stood between two worlds as they first reached for one another. This is a journey through peace and misunderstanding, belief and farewell, where history breathes not through dates and battles, but through human hearts. If this quiet space brings you comfort, you're always welcome to like or subscribe, a small gesture that keeps this candlelit corner alive. Night rests lightly upon the rivers of Matoaka. The stars shimmer above the great forests of the Chesapeake, their reflections trembling upon the slow, moving water. In the hush between owl cries and the sigh of wind through reeds, the world feels whole, unbroken. This is the land before the strangers came. When the Powhatan people still moved with the rhythm of the tides, when every dawn rose with purpose and every dusk folded gently into song, they call their home Matoaka, densely inhabited land, a place of many rivers and many tribes, bound together beneath the wisdom of Wahunsakor, the paramount chief the English would one day call Powhatan. To his people, he is more than a ruler, he is the keeper of balance, the guardian of stories that root the living to the land. His words carry the weight of generations, and in his shadow plays a child who will one day bridge two worlds. Matoaka, laughter of the river, spirit of the wind. Her name dances upon the lips of the people like sunlight upon the water. In the mornings, she runs barefoot through the tall grass near Werowokomoko, her laughter echoing like birdsong. She is the daughter of a chief and the child of a continent still unbroken, unaware that beyond the waves, a restless sea is already stirring. The people of Matoaka live in circles, the circle of seasons, of ceremony, of kinship. They plant corn and beans in soil turned soft by spring rains. They fish by torchlight, their spears flashing like stars in the dark. Smoke rises from the longhouses, curling toward a sky that listens. In these moments, the Powhatan live not beside the land but within it. Their world is not conquered but sung into being. Each act of life a quiet hymn of gratitude. The forests are alive with whispers of deer moving like ghosts between trees, of rivers thick with sturgeon, of children learning the language of water. For Matoaka, the world is a living classroom. Her grandmother teaches her which herbs soothe pain, which roots bring sleep. Her father teaches her that leadership is not a crown, but a burden. The art of listening to both the earth and the people. At night, she lies by the fire, eyes wide as the storytellers speak of beginnings. They tell of how the great hair shaped the rivers, how the first people learned the songs of corn, how every tree holds memory. These stories are not myth to her. They are truth woven into the breath of the land. She feels them in her pulse, in the rhythm of her small heart beating against the immensity of time. In the great council house, men gather to discuss the currents of politics that move unseen beneath the calm surface of peace. The tribes, Pamunkey, Chickahominy, Nansemond, and more, are bound by alliances delicate as spider silk. Powhatan's power rests on gifts, on marriages, on the unspoken understanding that harmony must be tended like fire. He knows that balance is fragile, that the world turns quickly from abundance to hunger. But even he, wise as the river, cannot sense the shadow that grows beyond the horizon. Far across the sea, wooden ships creak against the wind. In English ports, sailors speak of a place of gold and promise, a paradise waiting to be claimed. The ocean, indifferent and ancient, carries them slowly westward. They do not yet know the names of the rivers they will find, nor the people whose lands their hunger will cross. The sea swallows their songs and delivers only the faintest echo to the shores of Senecamaca. One evening, as twilight fades into indigo, Matoaka sits beside her father. The firelight flickers against his weathered face. He speaks softly, not as a chief to his people, but as a father to a daughter. There are two kinds of storms, he says, eyes fixed on the horizon. The ones that come from the sky and the ones that come from the sea. We can see the first, we cannot see the second until it is already upon us. She listens, not understanding, but something in his tone roots deep within her. A small seed of knowing that the peace she loves is not eternal. The seasons turn, the forests bloom, then fade. Children grow taller, stories grow longer. Life moves as it always has, and yet beneath the surface, change stirs like a distant drumbeat. Hunters returning from the coast speak of strange lights upon the water, of trees moving against the horizon, of birds with white wings that never flap. Some laugh it off as a spirit trick of the dawn, others fall silent, uneasy. The council gathers once more. Messengers bring word from the coastal tribes. Signs of foreign sails, glimpses of men clad in metal, their faces pale as river stones. Powhatan listens, unmoved on the surface but thoughtful within. He has heard such tales before, whispers of Spanish wanderers who came and vanished like ghosts. But this time, something feels different. The air itself carries a weight he cannot name. Matoaka, sitting near the fire, catches fragments of the talk, words of caution, of curiosity, of fear. She imagines these strangers as stories come to life, sea spirits, perhaps, or sky-fallen men. Her child's mind does not yet know what conquest means. She only knows that somewhere beyond the familiar rhythm of the river, the world is changing. As spring returns, the forests fill once more with birdsong. The people of Senecamaca dance, plant, and pray as they always have. Life continues in its steady circle, unaware that its course is about to bend. The river gleams beneath the sunrise, carrying reflections of a peace that will soon be tested. Somewhere far out to sea, the white sails of 3 ships catch the wind. The Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery, small, fragile vessels, filled with men who believe themselves chosen by fate. They do not yet know that their journey will divide worlds, that their hunger will shape centuries. The sea, vast and silent, bears them onward toward the edge of another people's story. On the banks of the river, Matoaka chases a dragonfly through the reeds. The morning light crowns her in gold. She does not see the sails, not yet. But the river does. It feels the tremor of what is coming, the small stirring that precedes the storm. In that still moment, Senecamaca stands on the threshold of history. A land breathes deeply, unaware that its next breath will be different. The air smells of cedar and salt. Somewhere in the distance, gulls cry, voices from another world. Beyond the horizon, the first English sails rise like ghosts upon the dawn. And in the quiet forests of Senecamaca, a young girl's laughter drifts across the water, unknowing that soon, the river she loves will carry the strangers home. Morning comes slowly to the river that will soon bear a foreign name. Mist clings to the reeds, to the curved trunks of cypress trees rising from the shallows. The air hums with the quiet life of early summer. Frogs, wings, the patient rhythm of water moving toward the sea. Then, through the mist, something new appears. 3 ships, weathered and pale, drift into view like ghosts: Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery. They carry the scent of salt and sickness, the echoes of prayers whispered across an ocean. On their decks stand men who have not seen land in months. Men with hollow eyes, blistered hands, and hearts full of a desperate dream. They are not conquerors yet, not even settlers, but wanderers clinging to an idea that across this endless water lies promise, that in this wilderness they might begin again. When the ships anchor at the river's bend, silence falls, that uncertain, suspended hush before one world meets another. The men gaze at the thick forest before them, an expanse of green so dense it feels alive. Somewhere among those trees, unseen eyes watch. The Powhatan know of the strangers. They have heard the rumors from the coast of pale-faced men who carry thunder in their hands, who hunger for gold and glory. Now, those stories have arrived at their doorstep. From the shadows, Pocahontas peers out with others from her village. She is still a child, no more than 10, her dark hair loose about her shoulders. The smell of the sea clings faintly to the air, strange and heavy. She does not understand the danger yet. To her, it is wonder. These floating wooden mountains, these men dressed in shining metal that glints like sunlight on the river. The English step onto the soft earth with relief that borders on reverence. Some kneel and kiss the ground. Others simply collapse. Overcome by exhaustion, they raise a wooden cross at the shore's edge, murmuring prayers to a distant god who, they hope, has not forgotten them. The sound drifts across the water, foreign syllables, sharp and sacred. It is the first English prayer ever spoken here, and the forest listens without understanding. They name the river James, after their king, and the new settlement Jamestown. The names are declarations, soft at first, but weighted with centuries to come. They do not yet know this soil's true power, how it will claim them, change them, and sometimes bury them. But for now they build. Axes bite into oak and pine. Trees fall, and with them, the silence of the forest begins to thin. The settlers carve out a clearing, stacking rough logs into walls. Within these walls, they will live, fear, fight, and pray. The fort rises slowly, its corners forming a triangle, both a shield and a cage. Food is scarce. Their provisions, meant to last months, dwindle in weeks. The land is generous but unfamiliar. They do not yet know which roots feed and which poison, which waters are safe to drink. Mosquitoes swarm like smoke. Fever spreads through the camp. The men curse the heat, the damp, the insects that whisper death. The dream of gold and glory fades quickly into survival. Among them walks Captain John Smith, restless, defiant, drawn to challenge like a moth to flame. He is not yet the hero that history will later paint, but a man of contradictions, proud and practical, fierce and idealistic. He writes in his journal of a land rich beyond imagination, of rivers that seem to flow with promise, yet even he feels the weight of the wilderness pressing close, a silence too vast for comfort. From the forest edge, the Powhatan watch the fort take shape. They see the trees fall, the smoke rise, the river darken with disturbed silt. Powhatan's messengers bring news of the strangers' weakness, their sickness, their hunger. Some urge war, others counsel patience. The chief listens in silence, measuring the wind of history as one measures the tide. He decides not to strike, not yet. A wise hunter does not chase prey already trapped by its own fear. Sometimes, the settlers see figures moving among the trees, fleeting shapes, gone before they can call out. They sense eyes upon them but cannot tell if they belong to friends or enemies. They are too few, too fragile, to know the difference. Each night they huddle behind their wooden walls, the sounds of the forest pressing close like a living thing. For Pocahontas, the months that follow are a study in distance. She hears stories from those who have gone near the stranger's fort. Stories of men coughing blood, of others kneeling in the mud to drink from the river. She asks her father why they suffer so. They came too far from what feeds them. Powhatan answers, "Even a tree cannot live if its roots are cut away." His words stay with her, though she does not yet know how deeply they will echo in her own life. Summer deepens. The settlers plant gardens, corn, beans, melons, but the earth yields little. They trade with nearby tribes for food, exchanging beads and copper for grain. But trust is thin as paper. Each gift is a question, peace, or a pause before conflict. When the first leaves begin to fall, the settlement still stands, though barely. Many are dead. The survivors grow gaunt, their faces lined with both hunger and awe. The fort's walls, meant to protect, now feel like prison bars, keeping them from the freedom of the forest. They are trapped between two fears, the unknown beyond and the failing hope within. And yet, amid the sickness and uncertainty, something begins to stir. Small gestures of curiosity across the divide. A child's face glimpsed through the trees. A cautious wave. A gift of food left at the edge of the clearing. No one yet speaks the other's language, but the silence between them starts to soften. At night, when the fires in Jamestown burn low, the river reflects two worlds, one flickering with torchlight, the other lost in shadow. Somewhere beyond that boundary, Pocahontas lies awake, listening to the same water that touches the settlers' feet. She wonders what they dream of, whether their gods hear them, whether they miss their homes as much as she cannot imagine them. The river holds both reflections, and in that mirrored surface, something ancient begins to shift. The settlers' fort rises behind its sharpened walls, fragile against the immensity of the forest. Beyond the trees, a child named Pocahontas watches, unknowing that soon she will step between two fires and history will remember her name. The river bends like a secret between two worlds. The English fort crouched upon one shore, the Powhatan villages breathing quietly upon the other. Between them lies a distance not measured by water, but by understanding. Each side studies the other as if gazing into a mirror warped by time, familiar yet strange. It is in this fragile space that Captain John Smith rises to prominence. He is not noble by birth, yet carries himself as though carved from the same stone as the kings he defies. A soldier of many wars, a wanderer of seas and battlefields, Smith has come to this land not to conquer, but to prove that he belongs somewhere history will remember. The colony, frail and fevered, needs such a man. His voice commands. His courage steadies. Even the forest seems to pause when he steps beyond the fort's gate. But courage alone cannot fill an empty stomach. Jamestown trembles on the edge of hunger, and Smith turns to the Powhatan for aid. He learns their paths, their rivers, their silences. His journal speaks of diplomacy, yet in truth, each meeting is a quiet battle of endurance, between fear and curiosity, between survival and pride. The Powhatan watch him with the wary patience of those who have seen storms before. To them, he is both threat and guest, neither enemy nor kin. Yet there is something in his manner that earns respect, not gentleness, but honesty. He carries no crown, only the restless fire of a man who has faced death too many times to fear it. Through trade and tense exchange, a rhythm begins. Corn for copper, meat for beads, words for gestures. It is not peace, but it is contact, the slow drawing of two worlds into orbit. One winter day, Smith and his small band venture upriver to explore. The air is sharp. The trees shimmer with frost. The river grows narrow, pressing close with branches heavy as arms. Without warning, arrows whistle through the air. The forest erupting in sound. His men fall. Smith dives for cover, musket heavy in his hand. He fights, but the woods belong to others. Soon he is overpowered, bound in ropes and led away through the thickets. Days blur into silence. His captors move him from village to village, each stop a lesson in foreign eyes. The people stare, not with cruelty, but with the curiosity one gives a rare and dangerous animal. Some wish him dead. Others, intrigued, wish to understand. Finally, they bring him before Wahansakaw, Powhatan himself. The paramount chief sits within a great longhouse, firelight flickering against the walls. He is tall, composed, his gaze the still surface of deep water. Around him stand warriors, painted and proud, their expressions unreadable. In their midst, Smith feels the weight of every mile he has travelled, from the wars of Europe to this fragile moment in a stranger's house at the edge of the world. He bows, not out of fear but instinct. The two men regard one another in silence. One wears feathers and shell, the other a worn leather coat. Yet between them stands something vast, the meeting of empire and earth, of ambition and belonging. Powhatan speaks first, his words measured through interpreters. Smith hears the meaning beneath them. Why are you here? What do you seek? It is not accusation, but recognition, as if the chief already knows the answer. Smith answers in kind, that they come for trade, for alliance, for survival. But his tone carries another truth, that his people have nowhere else to go. Powhatan listens. He has seen strangers before, Spaniards who came with fire, who vanished in blood and sickness. He knows the pattern of conquest that creeps like shadow, yet he sees in this man something different, perhaps foolishly so, a courage not yet hardened by greed. He decides to test him, not with swords, but with understanding. The story that follows will twist with time, retold in songs, reshaped by centuries of tongues. Some will say the Englishman is condemned, his head placed upon a stone, the warriors poised to strike. Others will say it was ceremony, a rite of adoption, a symbolic act of kinship. History does not speak clearly here. It murmurs, half in dream. What is certain is this: when the moment of tension breaks, a child is there. Pocahontas, her small frame bright with motion, steps forward through the circle of men. She kneels beside the stranger, eyes wide with both fear and compassion. Whether she shields him from death or simply partakes in a ritual beyond her years, the effect is the same. Her presence transforms the air. The warriors lower their clubs. Powhatan raises his hand. The fire crackles, soft as breath. In that stillness, a bridge forms, not of words, but of witness. A child's gaze connects what generations of diplomacy could not. Smith, bewildered and grateful, later writes of his salvation, of how the chief's daughter risked her life to save him. Perhaps it happened as he said. Perhaps it did not. Yet the truth that endures is not the act, but the symbol. In that room of smoke and tension, the fate of two nations tilts ever so slightly toward mercy. When the meeting ends, Powhatan rises and declares that Smith will live. not as prisoner but as guest. He will bring messages to Jamestown, gifts of corn, promises of exchange. The world resumes its cautious breathing. The English captain and the native king part as equals for the briefest of moments, each misunderstanding the other just enough to hope. As Smith leaves the longhouse, the air outside feels different. Sharper, charged. He glances back once and sees Pocahontas standing beside her father, her eyes luminous in the firelight. Neither knows that history will make their names inseparable, woven together by myth and longing. For now, she is only a child who watched a stranger's life spared, her innocence holding back the weight of empire for one fragile breath. When he returns to Jamestown, the men scarcely believe the tale he brings. He speaks of feasts and ceremony, of a kingly chief and his daughter's mercy. Perhaps he tells it to ease the memory of fear. Perhaps he tells it to give meaning to his survival. Or perhaps, in his loneliness, he needs to believe that kindness met him in the dark. Years later, when he writes his general history of Virginia, he will give that kindness a name: Pocahontas. He will tell the world that she saved his life, that her courage stood between death and deliverance, that a child's heart changed the fate of nations. And so the myth begins to move, soft as a river, relentless as time. It passes from book to stage, from England's parlours to America's classrooms. Painters imagine it beneath golden light, the child kneeling, the soldier wide-eyed in wonder. Generations of storytellers turn it into romance, softening its edges, forgetting its ache. In their hands, Pocahontas becomes more symbol than soul, the gentle bridge that justifies the crossing. Yet behind the legend remains the truth that cannot be erased. A girl once stood between two powers, and for an instant, she stopped the world from breaking. Perhaps it was mercy, perhaps it was ritual, perhaps it was the first act of understanding in a story mostly written by misunderstanding. In that uncertainty lies her quiet immortality. The myth will grow, bending like the river that shaped her childhood. It will twist through centuries of retelling, and each time she will appear again. Half dream, half truth, reminding us how easily history becomes story and story becomes belief. For the English, she will be the face of peace. For her own people, she will remain the child of Powhatan, whose innocence could not shield her world from what was coming. But in this moment, this flicker between life and legend, Pocahontas stands in both. And somewhere, across the tide of years, the echo of her voice still lingers, a whisper caught between the hush of two languages, asking softly what truth really means when hearts are trying to understand one another. The story spreads, golden and unsteady, across oceans and years, and as it grows, it begins to change her, turning the child of the forest into a figure of empire. There are seasons in history that feel like the pause between storms, quiet, uncertain, luminous with borrowed light. For the English and the Powhatan, this was that season. Between hunger and war, between mistrust and mercy, there came a moment when two worlds almost learned how to breathe together. It begins with footsteps on a dirt path. Small, light, and quick. Pocahontas walks, with a basket of corn, her laughter rising above the reeds like bird song. She is perhaps 13, her hair bound with river grass, her face painted for friendship. Behind her come women carrying fish, baskets of beans, and bundles of dried fruit, gifts from her father's people to the strangers who still do not understand the rhythm of this land. At Jamestown, the gates creak open, The air smells of wood smoke, sickness, and earth soaked in rain. The settlers, pale, hollow-eyed, still learning which roots can be eaten and which will kill, look up to see her. To them, she is a marvel, a symbol of hope carried on small feet. She calls out in her soft, musical tongue, offering food with a smile. The men answer with gestures, awkward gratitude spilling from their trembling hands. One kneels to show her a bead of blue glass, another offers a trinket, a bent copper bracelet. They do not share language, but they share something older, a mutual hunger for survival. John Smith watches from the fort's gate. The fire that nearly claimed his life now feels distant. He greets her not as a child, but as a bridge. Between them lies the fragile understanding that both sides need each other. Pocahontas visits often. The settlers grow used to her presence, the rustle of her approach, the rhythm of her laughter. She learns fragments of English words, shaping them on her tongue like river stones. Sometimes she plays with the children of the colonists, teaching them to weave reeds, to mimic bird calls, to dance in circles that leave footprints like petals in the dirt. For the first time, Jamestown breathes. The men begin to believe they might survive another winter. The corn she brings feeds them. The goodwill she embodies disarms them. They call her the dearest jewel of Virginia, not understanding how such words can glitter with both gratitude and possession. Smith writes of her often, of her brightness, her laughter, her courage. His accounts glow with admiration, but also with the hunger of a man who knows peace cannot last. The forest, vast and silent beyond their walls, still watches. Beyond that forest, her father, Chief Powhatan, watches too. He understands the settler's desperation, the dangerous balance between gift and threat. For now, his daughter's visits serve as diplomacy, gestures of goodwill, offerings that keep the English close, but not too close. He knows that peace, like the tide, must be managed, not trusted. But to Pocahontas, this time feels different. She sees friendship where her elders see caution. She feels no fear among the wooden walls of Jamestown. Her heart, still unscarred by betrayal, believes that kindness can mend anything. One evening, as the sun sinks into the river, she brings a bundle of deerskins as her father's gift. Smith meets her at the gate. He offers her a tin whistle, a small, shining thing that hums when the wind passes through it. She laughs, testing the sound, filling the weary fort with a melody that almost sounds like joy. For a heartbeat, peace feels possible. The English write home of abundance and alliance. They claim the natives are friendly, that God's favor rests upon their venture. Yet beneath the calm, need festers, supplies remain low. The settlers still hunger, and hunger, as Powhatan knows, always speaks the language of war. The months turn. Rain swells the rivers. Cornfields shimmer green. Pocahontas continues to visit, though the men she once knew begin to change. Their numbers swell. Their voices grow louder. The fort expands like a wound pushing into the forest's skin. Rumors drift through the villages of English raids, of Powhatan warriors retaliating. One act of mistrust leads to another. The peace that Pocahontas built with laughter begins to crack beneath the weight of fear. Still, she tries. When misunderstandings flare, she returns with messages, with gestures of apology. The settlers listen, grateful but guarded. Smith himself walks a tightrope between diplomacy and survival. He knows that without Powhatan's goodwill, Jamestown would vanish like smoke on the tide. One evening, as a storm gathers, Pocahontas arrives again. The fort's fires glow against the darkening sky. She stands in the rain, speaking softly, pleading for restraint. Her presence silences the men. For a moment, even thunder seems to pause. Then, a sound like fate itself. A musket misfires, the shot echoing through the trees. She flinches. The illusion shatters. Peace collapses not in declaration, but in sound, one sharp, irretrievable note. After that night, she comes less often. Her visits grow rare, her laughter distant. The settlers wait for her at the gate, but only silence returns. The peace that once felt eternal has thinned into memory. John Smith writes again, his words tinged with sorrow. She was the instrument of our preservation, he says. And now she is gone. In the Powhatan villages, elders whisper that the balance has been broken. The English take more each season, more land, more food, more certainty that the land belongs to them. The time of gifts is over. Yet, even as peace fades, its memory lingers. The brief season when two peoples, bound by necessity, reached toward understanding. It was fragile, imperfect, but real. And at the center of it stands a girl who believed that laughter could hold back war. The river still remembers her reflection, rippling between two worlds. But as peace fades, shadows rise. And soon, Pocahontas will vanish into them, drawn toward captivity, betrayal, and the long echo of her own legend. The winter comes like a slow closing hand. At first, it is only a chill that curls beneath the fort's palisades, a whisper in the marsh grass, a pale breath over the James. But soon the frost deepens, hardens, and everything the settlers built, their fragile walls, their uneasy peace, their hunger for this promised land, begins to crack beneath its weight. Inside Jamestown, the air thickens with smoke from green wood and unending fear. The settlers count their grain by the handful, their days by the sound of shovels in frozen soil. They eat roots, leather, anything that will quiet the ache. The wilderness, which once hummed with Powhatan's gifts of corn and fish, now stands apart, silent, watchful, withholding. It was not always so. Only months ago, Pocahontas came laughing through the gate, her arms full of maize, her voice soft with the rhythm of her people's speech. She brought warmth where suspicion once lived, the kind of warmth that makes men believe again in mercy. But now she does not come. The path from the forest lies buried beneath snow and memory. The English call this season the starving time. Their journals, smudged and desperate, will one day tell of horrors. Men boiling boots for broth, graves disturbed in secret hours. Yet in the telling, there is something more than suffering. There is the slow extinguishing of trust, the fragile bridge between two worlds, built by curiosity, kindness, and the small courage of one girl begins to burn. Beyond the walls, Powhatan watches. The paramount chief has withdrawn his hand, his traders, his friendship. He sees the English fort for what it is, not a settlement but a spark that may become a blaze. He remembers how they cut trees, seized fields, spoke of land as if it could belong to one man alone. So he tightens his circle. He orders his warriors to guard the rivers, to let no food pass, to teach these pale strangers that the forest gives only to those who respect it. To Powhatan, this is justice. To the settlers, it is war. The night skies deepen over Jamestown, ink dark, starless. The men huddle in their cabins, their prayers trembling between coughs. Some curse the land that will not yield. Others dream of England, its soft rains and endless bread. A few stare out through cracks in the timber walls, hoping for a flicker of movement among the trees. a sign, perhaps, that Pocahontas still walks the earth. But she is gone. No one in the fort knows where she has gone. Only that she vanished as the first frost fell. Some say she fled to her father's village, others that she married among her mother's kin. Perhaps she hides by the river, listening to the two worlds she once held together now fall apart in the cold. Whatever the truth, her absence feels like a silence too deep to name. The English remember her laughter as if it were light. The Powhatan remember her as the daughter who once smiled upon the strangers. And in the dark between them, that memory flickers like a dying flame. Winter presses on. The river freezes at its edges. The woods, once alive with songbirds, grow hollow. Even the dogs fall silent, and still, within the fort, the people wait for deliverance or death. One night, a single figure slips through the gate. A man gaunt as bone, his breath a mist of fever. He carries a piece of parchment and the desperate hope of diplomacy. He seeks an audience with Powhatan, bearing words of truce, but his voice trembles with hunger, not strength. The journey will not end well. He will not be seen again. By February, half the colony lies buried beneath the snow. The survivors move like ghosts, their faces pale as the moonlight that drips through the cracks. Yet even in ruin, a strange fire burns within them, the stubborn flame of those who refuse to be erased. They dream of spring, of ships from home, of green shoots breaking through the frost. But, for now, the world remains iron and ice. Somewhere beyond the reach of English prayers, Pocahontas watches the same winter sky. Perhaps she, too, listens to the sound of wind through dead leaves, the low moan of a river turning to glass. She knows the cost of survival, the quiet sacrifices that never make it into stories. Her people, too, have lost much. The arrival of the strangers has changed the rhythm of the forest forever. She remembers the fort, its strange smell of smoke and salt, the weary faces behind the wooden walls. She remembers John Smith's steady eyes, the way he spoke of home as if it were heaven itself. She remembers her father's silence when the name Jamestown was spoken in council. And she wonders what kind of bridge can endure when both shores are at war with themselves. When spring finally comes, it does not arrive with trumpets, but with the faintest sigh of warmth through the trees. Birds return, cautious and thin. The snow softens into mud, and from the horizon, sails appear once more. English ships heavy with supplies, with new faces and new ambitions. They bring life, yes, but also the promise of more hunger, more fire. Within the walls, the survivors rise from their sickness like sleepwalkers. They look to the river as if to a god. The first taste of grain on their tongues is like salvation. Yet even as they rejoice, the old fear stirs that peace, once lost, may never return. Pocahontas does not return to Jamestown. Her name becomes a rumor carried by the wind, spoken in half-truths, softened by longing. Some say she has turned away from both worlds, choosing instead the solitude of the river. Others whisper that she still watches, unseen, guiding the fragile line between survival and surrender. In truth, she is growing older. Somewhere in the folds of the forest, the girl who once ran laughing through reeds now listens to the sound of war drums in the distance. The world she knew is changing, and the next time she is seen by the English, she will no longer be the child they remember. She will be a woman with a name both hers and not hers, a bridge reforged by fate. For now, Jamestown leaves, but its survival is written in ashes, the memory of fire and famine carved deep into its heart. Spring will come again, carrying with it both mercy and betrayal. And in that uncertain thaw, Pocahontas will return, not as a child of the forest, but as a captive of two worlds. The river glides quiet beneath a grey sky. Spring lingers at its edges, soft but uncertain, a hesitant thaw after years of distrust. On its surface, the Potomac carries the slow reflection of two worlds, the forest, deep and endless, and the sails that rise like ghosts against it. The wind smells of salt and smoke. Something unspoken waits upon the water. In the English ship anchored by the shore, Captain Samuel Argall stands at the rail, watching the current turn. He is not cruel by nature, only ambitious. A man taught that conquest and faith are the same prayer spoken in different tongues. To him, this is diplomacy, not betrayal. If he captures the daughter of Powhatan, perhaps the war will end. Perhaps peace, that elusive prize, will finally be bought. But peace is never purchased easily. It is always someone's ransom. On the banks, Pocahontas walks among a small band of her people. She is older now, no longer the laughing child who once ran through the reeds at Jamestown. Her eyes have learned to weigh the silence between promises. She carries the calm of one who knows the earth's cycles, that after plenty comes famine, after peace comes fire, and that every gift between worlds carries a hidden cost. The English traders who lure her here speak of friendship, of reunion. They promise her sight of familiar faces, perhaps even a chance to speak again with those who once called her dearest jewel. She does not yet see the ship behind the bend, its masts waiting like spears against the horizon. When the ambush comes, it happens quietly, too quietly for legend. No sword is drawn, no cry raised. Words do the work instead, a feigned invitation, a handshake, a gesture toward the waiting deck. She hesitates, for the river's song falters, and even the birds seem to listen. Then, before she can turn, the ropes tighten. The current carries the echo of her name, then swallows it whole. Matoaka, Pocahontas, is taken. The ship's hold is small, its air thick with damp wood and the smell of salt and tar. Above her, the English voices drift like a distant storm. She sits alone in the dim light that filters through the cracks of the hull. The walls creak as though they, too, remember the trees they once were. She traces the grain of the timber, feeling it pulse faintly beneath her fingers, the heartbeat of the forest transformed into a cage. Outside, Captain Argall gives his orders. The ship's sails unfurl. The tide takes them. A messenger rides ahead to Powhatan's village, bearing a letter written in English hands. "We have your daughter. Send corn, weapons, and hostages in exchange for her return." It is not the language of peace, but of bargaining dressed as mercy. Powhatan's reply is cautious, then wounded. He delays, refuses, considers. He knows his daughter's value not just as kin, but as symbol, a bridge, a living treaty. Yet even symbols are fragile. The English know this. They mean to shape her into something new, something that will stand between them and the forest as proof that the two can coexist. But in the wooden shadows of the ship, Pocahontas begins her own transformation, one quieter and deeper than any they intend. She watches the flicker of the river through the cracks, the dance of light across her hands. The water is her oldest friend, her first teacher. It reminds her that even what is bound can still flow. Days pass. The ship drifts to Jamestown, then farther up the James to Henricus. There, she is received not as a prisoner, but as a guest in name only, a guest who cannot leave. The settlers speak softly around her, offering food, gifts, and strange words of faith. They speak of salvation, of rebirth, of a God who demands surrender in exchange for eternal freedom. To them, she is both daughter and tool, a living emblem of conversion, the proof that the new world can be tamed through grace, but inside her, the forest remains. At night, she dreams of the river's curve, of the scent of pine and sweetgrass. She sees her father's face across the council fire, lit by embers that fall like stars. She remembers the laughter of children chasing her shadow along the shore, and the way John Smith once spoke of her courage as if it were a legend already written. Those memories blur now, distant but warm. Like a hearth glimpsed from afar, the English teach her to pray. She listens, repeating the words, though their meaning slips like water through her grasp. They call her Rebecca when they baptize her, a name that means to tie, to bind. They do not see the irony. To them, it is a name of salvation. To her, it feels like a new kind of tether. Captain Argyle watches from afar, satisfied that his plan has worked. The war with Powhatan eases. Trade resumes. The colony breathes again. Yet something in his chest feels unsettled. He tells himself that this was necessary, that peace demands sacrifice. But some nights, when the wind moans through the rigging, he hears her voice, soft, melodic, carrying through the dark like a song he cannot forget. And Pocahontas herself, she does not rage. She does not plead. Instead, she learns. She listens. She begins to understand the words of her captors, their fears, their faiths. She reads their faces the way she once read the river, noting the small eddies of doubt beneath the surface. She comes to see that captivity is not only made of walls. Sometimes it is made of expectation, of the heavy silence between who one was and who others wish them to be. Weeks turn into months. The air grows warmer, the river alive again with light. The men of Jamestown speak of her with reverence, almost affection. They say she has changed, that she is docile, obedient, civilized. But inside, her spirit is not broken. It is merely listening, waiting. She moves between their words as she once moved between trees, quietly, invisibly, surviving. In letters sent back to England, her story already begins to reshape. The savage's daughter, redeemed by faith. The peace bringer. The gentle intermediary. None of them see her as she truly is, a woman standing alone between two worlds that do not yet know how to meet without breaking something sacred. Somewhere beyond the fort, in the depths of the forest, Powhatan mourns not only his daughter's capture, but the turning of the age. He feels the roots of his land shift beneath him. The English grow stronger, their ships more frequent. The rivers, once belonging only to his people, now carry a different language upon their waves. He knows that to fight them is to fight the tide itself. And still, he waits for word, for a sign that the child who once danced beside his fire still remembers his songs. Back in Henricus, Pocahontas sits by the riverbank. The water moves as it always has, indifferent, eternal. She dips her hand into it, watching the ripples widen and fade. Somewhere downstream lies Jamestown, and farther still, the endless sea that will one day carry her across to another world. But for now, she remains here, suspended between what was and what must come. The sun sets over the James, and the light turns copper, the colour of both endings and beginnings. She closes her eyes and listens to the whisper of the current. It tells her a truth the English will never understand, that even when trapped, the river remembers its course. Beyond the fort, spring deepens, and with it a strange rebirth begins. Soon, the captive of two worlds will be given a new name, and a faith that seeks to claim her soul. Morning mist rises over Henricus, soft and silvery, curling through the branches of the leafless trees. The air smells of ash and dew, of wood smoke and quiet beginnings. Beyond the wooden palisade, the river gleams. Pale, almost holy, its surface carrying the faint reflection of a world in transition. It is here, in this fragile outpost of English hope, that a new story begins to take shape. Pocahontas stands at the edge of the water, watching her reflection tremble. She hardly recognizes the woman who gazes back, the wild laughter of her youth. The sunlight that once danced in her steps has faded into stillness. The English call her gentle, docile, saved. But she feels not salvation, only distance. Around her, the settlement stirs awake. Bells toll softly, calling the faithful to prayer. The English bow their heads, reciting words that roll like unfamiliar stones across her tongue. She listens to the hymns, to the cadence of their belief, a rhythm foreign yet strangely comforting in its certainty. They speak of sin and redemption, of one true God who watches all. The missionaries say He has chosen her for a great purpose, that she will stand as proof that the heathen can be washed clean and reborn in light. She nods politely. She smiles when they smile. But inside, she walks among the tall pines of memory, where the world once made sense, where the Creator's voice was in the wind and the rustle of leaves, where every creature was kin, not creation. In their language, they say she is to be baptized. They tell her that this will make her new, that the river will wash away her past and clothe her soul in eternity. She thinks of the river she has always known, the James, the Pamunkey, the Chickahominy, waters that have cradled her people for generations. Those rivers never asked for her name to change. Yet she agrees. When the day comes, the whole settlement gathers by the water's edge. The sky is grey, the air still. Reverend Matoaka stands before her, his voice solemn and measured. He speaks of faith, of grace, of God's mercy reaching across oceans. He dips his hand into the river and lets the drops fall upon her head. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, he says, "You are now Rebecca, Rebecca." The name echoes softly, as if carried by the current. To the English, it is a name of beauty, of promise. A name from their holy book, the wife of Isaac, the mother of nations. They see it as a triumph of faith, but to her, it feels like a borrowed skin, smooth and cold against her own. Still, she carries it with quiet grace. In the days that follow, Rebecca learns their prayers by heart. She speaks them with a soft, careful voice, shaping each word as though it might shatter. The settlers are kind to her in their way. They bring her bread, teach her to read from the small Bible they place in her hands. The letters fascinate her. Tiny marks that hold meaning, that build worlds. She wonders if the English, too, are captives of their words, bound by the very symbols they worship. Sometimes she walks alone through the edge of the forest, where the wind still smells of home. There, she whispers her Powhatan name, Matoaka, to the trees. She listens as the forest answers in silence. No matter what the English call her, that name still belongs to the river, to the earth that first shaped her. At night, the stars remind her of both worlds. The missionaries say heaven lies beyond them, but she feels heaven here. In the pulse of the river, in the rhythm of her breath. She wonders if faith can live in two languages at once. The settlers tell stories of the world she cannot yet see, of cities where the streets are paved with stone, of kings and queens, of cathedrals that reach the sky. They tell her that one day she might travel there, that she would be welcomed as proof that the savage can become civilized. She listens, quiet but curious, thinking not of grandeur but of distance. To cross that sea would be to step beyond everything she has ever known. Among the English who live in Henricus is John Rolfe, a man of quiet speech and thoughtful eyes, whose fields of tobacco ripple gold in the wind. He treats her with a gentleness that feels unfamiliar, less like pity, more like respect. When he speaks, his voice carries no command. Instead, there is something patient in it, something almost tender. He calls her by her English name, Rebecca, but the way he says it, soft, unhurried, almost gives it back to her. In his company, she feels less like a symbol and more like a woman once again. He speaks of loss, too, of his wife who died on the voyage from England, of how grief taught him humility. Between them grows a silence not of distance, but of understanding. Two exiles, bound by different sorrows, learning to see one another through the fog of history. As the weeks pass, Pocahontas, Rebecca, begins to move between the worlds with a strange kind of grace. She teaches the settlers her people's songs, soft melodies that wind through the dusk like prayer. She tells them stories of the Great Spirit, of the balance between earth and sky. Some listen with wonder, others with polite skepticism, but for a moment, as her voice carries over the fields, it feels as if both faiths breathe the same air. Still, when she lies awake at night, the question lingers. Who am I now? The name Rebecca glows faintly in her mind, like a candle whose flame will not quite settle. Matoaka feels like a dream spoken by the river. Pocahontas, the name of laughter, of legend, belongs to the world that is already vanishing. Perhaps, she thinks, she is all of them and none of them. Perhaps every bridge must carry more than one name. Spring deepens. The river warms. The settlers write letters home, telling of the miraculous conversion of the Powhatan princess. A tale that will cross oceans and kindle wonder. They speak of peace, of hope, of civilization triumphing through faith. But they do not speak of the quiet woman who walks by the water each morning, whispering prayers in two tongues, asking the same question to two different gods. She looks toward the horizon where the river meets the sky. Somewhere beyond, the sea waits, vast and unknowable like destiny itself. One day she will cross it. One day she will see the world that has already claimed her story. But for now, she remains still, half in the forest, half in the chapel's shadow, her heart divided yet whole. Soon, the river will carry her farther than she has ever dreamed, across the ocean toward the world that named her. And there, the woman once called Pocahontas will stand before kings, as both legend and longing reborn. Spring returns to Virginia with hesitant light. The frost recedes from the banks of the James River, and the first buds open like small promises. In the settlement of Jamestown, the sound of hammers and saws mingles with birdsong. The English plant their faith and their ambition in the same soil, and the land listens in silence. Among the wooden walls of Henricus, Pocahontas walks quietly beneath a veil of linen. The name Rebecca now clings to her like new bark on an old tree, smooth, pale, and foreign. The scent of river reeds and pine resin still lingers in her memory, though the air around her smells of smoke, salt, and tobacco. John Rolfe meets her in the small chapel by the river. He is not a soldier nor a man of conquest, but one of cultivation, a farmer of leaves, a dreamer of markets. His hands, rough from tending tobacco seedlings, tremble slightly as he sees her approach. The moment feels fragile, as if the two of them are stepping across thin ice, where love and politics blur into the same reflection. The priest begins the ceremony. English words rise softly into the rafters, foreign prayers carried by the wind. She repeats them carefully, syllable by syllable, her voice gentle yet firm. In that moment, she is both bridge and boundary, both woman and symbol. The settlers watch, murmuring blessings. The river outside flows slowly, as if pausing to witness this fragile peace. For the English, this union is a miracle. For Powhatan's people, it is a mystery, a daughter of the forest joining hands with those who cut it down. Yet even they, weary of war and hunger, allow themselves to hope. Perhaps peace may grow where love takes root. Powhatan himself does not come. He sends gifts instead, beads, deerskins, and silence. Perhaps that silence is his true offering, a reluctant blessing from a father who knows that peace often demands a kind of loss too deep for words. After the vows, they step into the sun. The wind off the river catches her veil, lifting it like a white bird. The crowd cheers. Somewhere beyond the clearing, a heron rises, startled by the sound. For a brief season, Virginia breathes easier. The union of Pocahontas and John Rolfe becomes legend before it becomes life. The English call it the Peace of Pocahontas. For 8 years, there are no battles between the settlers and the Powhatan Confederacy. Trade returns to the rivers. Corn for copper, food for tools. The forest edge grows quieter. John tends his fields with patient hands. Tobacco, the leaf that will soon shape an empire, stretches green and fragrant under the southern sun. Each morning, Pocahontas joins him, her feet bare against the dew-soaked earth. She learns the rhythm of planting and drying, of bundling leaves for the ships that sail eastward. She listens to him speak of markets in London, of fortunes waiting across the sea. Sometimes, when he speaks of the old world, she closes her eyes and imagines it, streets made of stone, towers touching clouds, voices echoing in cathedrals. It feels like another dream, one she cannot quite enter. At night, the couple walks by the riverbank. The stars above Virginia mirror the same constellations she once traced in her father's lodge. Yet something in them feels changed, as if distance itself has become her new homeland. She tells John of her people, of stories where deer speak and rivers remember the faces of those who walk beside them. He listens, though he cannot always understand. Still, his eyes are kind, and his silence feels like respect. Their son is born a year later, Thomas Rolfe, a child of two worlds. In his cradle, the English see hope. In his eyes, the Powhatan might see both loss and continuity. Pocahontas holds him close, tracing his face with reverent fingers. She whispers his two names, one for each heritage, and wonders what world will claim him. But peace is never still for long. Rumors drift through the colony, of old resentments stirring in the woods, of Powhatan warriors who refuse to trade, of English settlers pushing deeper into tribal lands. The soil grows rich with tobacco and tension alike. John worries, but not for war. He dreams instead of London, of presenting this living symbol of reconciliation to the king and queen. He believes the world must see that Virginia is no longer wild, that its savages can be civilized through faith and marriage. Pocahontas hesitates. The sea feels vast, unknowable. Yet she agrees, perhaps out of duty, perhaps out of curiosity. Part of her still wonders what lies beyond the horizon. What kind of heaven her husband's prayers promise. As they prepare for the voyage, she walks one last time along the forest's edge. The trees whisper her true name, Matoaka. The wind carries her childhood laughter down to the water's edge, where it fades into the tide. She gathers a handful of soil and holds it to her heart. Then she lets it fall, like a farewell that must remain unspoken. In April of 1614, the marriage of Pocahontas and John Rolfe is recorded in the church registry, ink sealing what time will one day turn to legend. The English rejoice. The king's ministers in London speak of divine providence. The colonists dream of a future in which the new world and the old stand side by side in faith. Yet in the forests beyond their walls, the drums remain silent, and the night air carries no song. Peace stands like a fragile flame, bright, trembling, and brief. Soon, the tide will carry her eastward, toward a world she has only seen in dreams. The forests of Virginia fade behind her, and the sea opens like a question. Vast, uncertain, eternal. The Virginia dawn comes quietly, soft as a prayer. The mist curls over the James River like breath over a sleeping child. The water moves slowly, murmuring to the reeds, and somewhere beyond the trees, a new cry pierces the morning, the cry of a newborn. In the small timber dwelling of John Rolfe, Pocahontas holds her son against her chest. His skin is pale and warm, his breath a rhythm both strange and familiar. He is the meeting of two histories, one written in the soil of Seneca, the other inked in the ledgers of England. In him, the forest and the fort are bound together, however uneasily. She names him Thomas. The English priest blesses him in words that drift past her like wind through pine. Yet in her heart she whispers another name, one the priest does not hear. A name that belongs to the old tongue, to her people, to the river that raised her. She knows both will live in him, the seen and the unseen. When the sun rises, it touches her face through the small window. The light settles upon her gently, as if in recognition. She remembers the warmth of home, the smoke of her father's lodge, the sound of her people's laughter in the fields. So much of that world has vanished, yet it lives in echoes within her, as if memory itself refuses to die. The colony grows. Tobacco stretches green and golden across the soil, its scent thick in the air. Ships come and go, bringing letters, cloth, and whispers of distant England. John speaks often of London, of streets paved in stone, of churches that pierce the clouds. He dreams of taking her there, of showing her the world that shaped his own. Pocahontas listens in silence, rocking Thomas in her arms. The thought of crossing the sea feels like walking through another kind of forest, vast, unknown, without trail or return. But she says nothing. Her heart, once fierce and curious, now beats softly for the small life before her. Each day, she tends to her son while the English labour in the fields. She teaches Thomas to touch the bark of trees gently, to listen to the wind before speaking. Sometimes she hums the songs her mother once sang, lullabies woven from river and moonlight. They are not English songs, yet they soothe him all the same. The settlers watch her with wonder. To them, she is both woman and emblem, the proof that faith and civility can tame the wilderness. Ministers speak of her in sermons. Writers in London compose pamphlets about her grace. She becomes an idea, the Indian princess who found God. But Pocahontas feels none of this glory. She walks through the settlement with quiet humility, her steps unhurried, her gaze often distant. When she looks toward the forest, her eyes soften. Somewhere beyond that green horizon, her father still rules, and her brothers still hunt the deer that wander close to the river. She wonders if they think of her, if they still speak her name beside their fires. At night, when the stars gather above the river, she sits by the window and holds Thomas close. The world outside is vast and changing, yet here, in this small circle of candlelight, time seems to slow. She thinks of how her people saw the stars, not as distant fires, but as ancestors watching from the sky. Perhaps her mother is among them now, whispering blessings upon the child she never knew. Sometimes she dreams. In her dreams, she walks again through the tall grass of Werowocomoco, the wind carrying the scent of river clay and cedar. She hears laughter, drums, the rhythm of feet against earth. But when she turns to find the faces, the forest fades, and she wakes with tears she cannot name. John does not understand these silences, though he tries. He speaks gently of their future, of their shared faith, of how their union brings peace. And yet, even in his tenderness, there is a kind of distance. A gap no marriage can bridge, born of two worlds that speak in different tongues. Years pass like the tide, returning, retreating, reshaping the shore. Thomas begins to walk. His small hands grasp at the air, at sunlight, at life itself. His laughter rings through the cabin like music. Pocahontas feels a peace in his joy that the world cannot touch. In him, she senses the continuation of something ancient and sacred, a lineage not erased but transformed. Still, the whispers of England grow louder. John writes letters to the Virginia Company, speaking of the potential of their new world, of the harmony between settlers and natives. They ask to see proof, and so the request comes. Pocahontas and her husband are to sail to London, to stand before King James himself as living testimony of England's divine success in Virginia. When the letter is read aloud, she says nothing. The river outside glimmers in the evening sun, its surface calm yet deep with unseen currents. She knows that once she crosses the sea, the tide will never carry her back the same. That night, she walks to the edge of the water. The air is heavy with summer. She kneels and places her hand upon the surface. Cool, alive, shifting. "If I go," she whispers, "remember me." The river answers only with ripples that catch the moonlight, as if keeping her promise. When she returns to the cabin, Thomas sleeps soundly. His small chest rises and falls in rhythm with the night. She sits beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. He stirs and murmurs, his lips forming soft, broken words she cannot yet understand. She wonders what stories he will grow to hear. The ones told by her people, or the ones written by his father's world. She knows that memory, like water, changes its shape to fit the vessel that holds it, but she also knows that some rivers run too deep to forget. As the candle burns low, she closes her eyes and listens to the river, to the wind, to the pulse of life that moves through both forest and fort alike. The world is shifting, yet beneath it all, something eternal hums. The quiet song of belonging, of motherhood, of memory. Soon, the sails will rise against the dawn, and the sea will beckon her name. But before the tide takes her, the wind carries one last echo across the riverbanks, a whisper from the homeland she still dreams of. Come home, Matoaka. And beyond the horizon, England waits, a world both promised and unknown. The sea breathes beneath her, wide, grey, unending. For months it has rolled like a living creature, vast as memory, cold as prophecy. Pocahontas stands upon the deck, her shawl pulled tight against the salt wind, her eyes tracing the line where water meets sky. The ship creaks, the ropes groan, gulls cry in the distance. Somewhere behind her, Virginia fades into mist, the forests of her childhood, the river where she once laughed, the land that named her. Ahead lies England, a place she has only heard in prayers and promises, a world of smoke and stone. The sailors call her Lady Rebecca Rolfe. They nod politely when they pass, whispering of the Indian princess who has crossed an ocean for peace. She hears the name echo through the planks, as if it belongs to someone else. Rebecca, a name born of water and baptism, of a faith taught in captivity and affection. But in the rhythm of the waves, another name hums beneath her breath, Matoaka. The secret name, the one the river gave her, it still beats like a heart inside the borrowed syllables of Rebecca. Each night she looks up at the stars, seeking the constellations her people rid like maps. But the sky here feels different, colder, more crowded. She wonders if her ancestors can still see her, so far from their fires. John Rolfe comes to her side sometimes, gentle and earnest, his hand resting on hers. He tells her of the green hills and tall cathedrals that await them, of how the English court will welcome her as proof that the new world has been tamed and blessed. She smiles softly but says little. How does one tell a man that the world he calls new is older than his empire's dreams? When they reach the mouth of the Thames, winter light spreads like pewter across the river. London rises before her, vast, smoky, alive. Bells toll in distant towers. Masts crowd the harbour like a forest of pale wooden trees. The smell is strange, coal and wet stone, the breath of thousands of fires. Children shout from the docks, merchants call, horses clatter over the cobblestones. Pocahontas steps ashore in a silence that feels both reverent and unreal. The world seems to tilt beneath her, as though the river itself still carries her in its current. They dress her in silks and lace, the colours of foreign gardens. Her hair is pinned, her face powdered. Courtiers bow as she passes, whispering admiration and curiosity. To them, she is a living emblem, the civilized savage, proof that England's mission across the sea is holy and just. She does not argue. She walks with grace, her steps steady, her gaze lifted. Yet inside, she feels like the forest tree that has been uprooted and placed in a painted pot. Alive, but far from its roots. At the royal palace, she meets nobles with voices smooth as velvet and hearts shaped by ambition. They marvel at her composure, her quiet dignity, her ability to speak their tongue. Princess Rebecca, they call her, though she knows her father's land held no such title. She smiles, remembering Powhatan sitting by the fire, his hands marked by years of counsel and battle. In him, kingship had been measured not by jewels or crowns, but by the strength to keep peace among many nations. One evening, as snow begins to fall upon London's rooftops, Pocahontas looks out from her chamber window. The city glows beneath her like a living lantern, its fires flickering through the fog. She closes her eyes and imagines the river at home. The James, winding through cattails and whispering reeds. In her mind, she hears the songs of her people, soft, low, rising like smoke into the night. They are songs of belonging, of roots sunk deep in soil and story. She hums them quietly, though the notes feel fragile in the cold air of this foreign room. Courtiers invite her to banquets where golden plates shimmer and laughter rings loud. They toast her beauty, her grace, her conversion. But each time a cup is raised, she feels the weight of what has been lost. Her mother tongue fading on her lips, her homeland spoken of as property and potential. She speaks when asked, kind and composed, her English soft and clear. Yet between the sentences, her silence tells another story, one only the wind might understand. Sometimes she walks through the gardens at dawn, where frost gathers on the hedges and ravens caw from the gates. She gathers small things, a sprig of ivy, a pebble from the path, a fallen feather. She keeps them in a small pouch, like tokens of remembrance. When the sun breaks through the fog, she lifts her face to the light and whispers a prayer, half in English, half in the tongue of her childhood. "Let me not forget," she says. John Rolfe watches her often, uncertain what world she truly inhabits. To him, she is both wife and wonder, the gentle proof that his God's promise reaches across oceans. He loves her sincerely, though perhaps never wholly understands her silences. When he speaks of returning home to Virginia, she nods with longing, but also with unease. She has changed, and so has the meaning of home. In the halls of London, word of her presence spreads. Poets write verses comparing her to Eve, to virtue, to the dawn of civilization. Painters capture her likeness. Dark eyes, calm smile, lace framing her face. In each image something essential fades. The girl who once ran through the tall grass, the one who laughed by the river. Yet Pocahontas bears it all with quiet grace. Perhaps she knows that every age remakes its symbols to suit its dreams. One afternoon, she is presented before King James and Queen Anne. The court glitters with jewels and expectation. She bows with practiced poise, the air thick with incense and praise. The king looks upon her as a curiosity, a triumph of mission. But the queen's eyes soften. Perhaps she sees, beneath the silk, the quiet ache of a woman far from home. When Pocahontas rises, she feels a strange calm, as though she has stepped through history itself. Both participant and ghost. As spring edges nearer, she grows pale and weary. London's air, heavy with smoke, clings to her lungs. Yet she walks still, attending gatherings, smiling for artists, standing at the threshold of two worlds that will forever misunderstand each other. At night she dreams of the sea again, endless, grey, forgiving. In those dreams, she sails backward, toward the river of her youth, where reeds whisper her true name. Sometimes, as dawn breaks, she wakes to the sound of gulls outside the window. The same sound she heard when first she arrived. It feels like the sea calling her home. She sits by the fire and watches the flames flicker. The English believe her story is one of conversion and victory, but she knows it is also one of survival, the quiet endurance of the spirit that remembers who it is, even when renamed. She touches the pendant at her neck, a gift from Rolfe, a small cross of silver. Beneath it, she wears another charm, a tiny carving from her people, smoothed by years of touch. Two symbols resting upon the same heart. Two worlds, both hers, neither fully home. And when she walks by the Thames, wrapped in her cloak, the wind carries whispers from far away. She listens, closing her eyes. For a moment, she thinks she hears the river of Tsenacomaca singing back. A memory crossing the waves, reminding her that even bridges made of sorrow still hold. Soon, the court will summon her to a masque. a glittering dream of empire where illusion reigns brighter than truth. There, amid the music and masks, she will glimpse her own reflection and the distance between who she was and what the world has made her. The night glows with the shimmer of torches and candlelight. Perfume drifts through the corridors of Whitehall Palace, mingling with the smell of burning wax and damp winter air. The hum of anticipation ripples through the hall as nobles take their places, jewels glinting beneath the chandeliers. Tonight, a masque will be performed. A vision of paradise and empire, a dream dressed in silk and song. At the center of this gathering, Pocahontas walks quietly beside her husband, her steps measured, her face serene. She is clothed in satin and pearls, her dark hair gathered with a silver comb. Around her, courtiers murmur, some in admiration, others in curiosity. The king is present, the queen, too, seated upon gilded chairs, their expressions painted with the satisfaction of dominion. The music begins, flutes, viols and drums, and the masque unfolds like a pageant of conquest. Painted gods descend from the ceiling. Dancers, their faces masked, move in choreographed harmony. They represent continents, oceans, and virtues. A voice declares the glory of England's reach. From the far Indies to the New Virginia, the crowd applauds. When Pocahontas hears the word Virginia, her breath stills for a heartbeat. The name feels like both wound and memory. She pictures the forests after rain, the slow bend of the James River, the voices of her people carried through the trees. In this hall, that sacred land has been remade into a symbol, a place of gold and salvation, a corner of the world claimed by the crown. As the masque continues, a young actor steps forward, his costume adorned with feathers and beads. He bows before the queen, offering her a garland, a gesture meant to symbolize peace between the old world and the new. The audience laughs softly, charmed by the fantasy, but Pocahontas feels something else, the tremor of irony. Peace, she thinks, is not a costume one can put on and remove between acts. Still, she watches with quiet wonder. The performance is beautiful, colors and motion and light woven together. Yet beneath the beauty lies an ache she cannot name. Perhaps it is the strangeness of seeing her own world turned into theatre, her people's existence flattened into myth for another's delight. She sits still, her hands folded, her face calm. To the onlookers, she is the image of grace, but inside she is a tide holding back its own roar. After the final act, the masque gives way to music and dance. Courtiers rise, their laughter echoing like bells. Pocahontas is approached by a lady of the queen's household, gentle, curious, her voice lilting. "You must find all this strange," she says kindly. Pocahontas smiles. "It is beautiful," she replies. And it is, but beauty, she knows, can be both wonder and veil. The lady gestures toward a polished mirror near the wall, its frame carved with angels and vines. "You should see yourself," she says. "How radiant you look, Lady Rebecca." Pocahontas steps closer, drawn by the mirror's glow. For a moment, she hesitates. She has not seen her reflection clearly since she left home. In the rippling glass, the woman who looks back at her seems both familiar and foreign, a stranger shaped by distance. The lace collar, the pale powder, the jewels at her throat all speak of England, but her eyes, dark, deep, unchanging, still belong to the forests of Seneca. She studies herself in silence. Behind her reflection, she sees the room, the glittering nobles, the laughter, the painted masks. And within it all, she sees the delicate truth. She has become both bridge and boundary. To these people, she is the living proof that the world can be remade in their image. But to herself, she is something else. The memory of a river in winter, the echo of her mother's voice in the dawn mist, the fragile thread that ties past to present. John Rolfe joins her side, his hand resting lightly on hers. "You see how they adore you," he says softly. "Even the king is pleased." She turns to him and smiles faintly. "Adoration," she answers, "is not always understanding." He does not reply. The musicians begin another tune, and the guests twirl across the marble floor, skirts and sleeves shimmering like waves. As the night deepens, Pocahontas drifts between worlds. She listens to the music and imagines the drumbeats of her people's dances. She watches the candles flicker and remembers the firelight in her father's lodge. The two memories overlap, not in conflict, but in haunting harmony. It is as if she carries two songs within her, both beautiful, both incomplete. Later, the queen approaches her, gracious, dignified, her gaze steady. "You have travelled far, my dear," the queen says, her tone warm yet formal. "Your courage brings honour to both our lands." Pocahontas bows slightly. "I thank your majesty," she answers. The queen studies her for a moment, then adds, "May you always find peace between them." The words linger, a benediction, or perhaps a question. When the festivities finally end, Pocahontas steps out into the night air. The palace gardens lie silent, the moon low over the Thames. The noise of the masque fades behind her, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves. She breathes deeply. The scent of frost, of distant water. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Each note falls like a drop upon her heart. She walks along the path, her gown brushing the gravel, her breath a thin cloud in the cold. For a moment, she closes her eyes and imagines the stars above Virginia, scattered over a sleeping forest. In her mind, the two skies merge, the English and the Powhatan, each holding a part of her soul. Tonight, she has seen what empires dream of: order, glory, perfection. Yet she knows that beneath every mask lies longing, and beneath every mirror lies truth. The mask will fade, the music will end, but the reflection she carries will remain, a woman between worlds, neither conquered nor complete, still searching for the face she once knew in the river's surface. Soon, amid the crowded streets of London, she will meet a familiar figure. One who once stood at the heart of her story. In that quiet encounter, myth and memory will finally look into each other's eyes. The winter air hangs heavy with mist, curling through the narrow streets of London like memory itself. Quiet, uncertain, searching for form, carriages rattle over the stones, the scent of smoke and damp straw filling the cold morning. Within this grey hush, Pocahontas walks beside her husband, her cloak drawn close. She listens to the city, to the cry of hawkers, the toll of distant bells, the slow rhythm of a world that has forgotten how to be still. It has been months since she first arrived in England, months since her name became a curiosity at court. Lady Rebecca Rolfe, the papers call her, the converted princess, the peace made flesh. Yet beneath the titles and silks, her heart remains restless. Some days she dreams of her father's fires, other days of the river where she once ran free. But lately a different memory stirs. The face of a man she once saved, long ago, by the banks of a different river, John Smith. The name drifts through her like a half-remembered song. Once, he had been the centre of every telling, brave, clever, defiant. The English have turned their meeting into legend. Their story now walks ahead of them, gilded by imagination. But the truth is quieter. Two strangers, two worlds, and a moment of mercy that neither fully understood. Now, years later, he is in London too. Older, altered, his adventures long behind him. When she learns of his presence, curiosity awakens like a small flame in her chest. She does not know if she wishes to thank him, forgive him, or simply remember him as he was. Yet she sends word, and he agrees to meet. They choose a modest chamber near the river. The Thames flows beyond the window, grey and endless, carrying the murmur of distant tides. Pocahontas enters quietly, her husband waiting outside. Inside, the light is dim, filtered through frost-laced glass. Smith rises to greet her. He bows stiffly, uncertain, perhaps even ashamed. Time has weathered him. His hair, once dark, is streaked with grey. His hands bear the callouses of a soldier long out of battle. Still, his eyes hold that old spark, the restless glint of a man who once dreamed of new worlds. "Lady Rebecca," he says, his voice measured. "It has been many years." She inclines her head. "It has," she answers softly. For a heartbeat, silence stretches between them, not awkward, but dense with unspoken years. "I have heard much of you," he continues, "of your journey here, of your marriage, and I," she says, "have heard much of you. They say you are a great captain still, though not at sea." He smiles faintly, though the warmth does not reach his eyes. "The sea has no need for old captains," he murmurs. She studies him. This man who once stood before her father's court, whose life once hung by a thread of mercy. In him she sees not the hero of English songs, but a wary wanderer, one who has crossed oceans and found only the limits of his own legend. "Do you remember?" she asks. "The day we met?" "I do," he says quickly, though the telling of it seems to have changed with every tongue that speaks it. She nods. "They have made it a story," she says. "One I no longer recognize." He glances toward the river. "Stories are what remain when truth grows old," he says quietly. For a long while they stand in the stillness, the fire crackling between them. The room smells of smoke and damp wool, of a world far smaller than the one they once imagined. "I was young then," he says finally. "Foolish, perhaps. I thought the world could be shaped by courage alone." "And I was younger still," she replies. "I thought kindness could change it." Their eyes meet, and in that shared silence the myth dissolves. There is no hero, no savior, no princess. Only two people bound by the fragile thread of memory, each carrying the weight of what time has done. He takes a step closer, as if to speak again, but stops. "You saved my life once," he says. "I have never forgotten." She looks at him gently. "And yet, in saving you, I did not save what followed," she murmurs. He flinches at the truth of it, for between them stands the shadow of all that came after the wars. The hunger, the dying forests, the shifting tides of power. His eyes fall. "We meant to build something new," he whispers. "You did," she says. "And in building it, you forgot what was already there." He nods, his hands trembling slightly. "Then perhaps," he says, "we were both trying to build bridges that could not last." Her voice softens. "Bridges do not last forever," she says. "But sometimes, for a while, they hold." For the first time, he smiles. A true smile, weary but sincere. "You speak like one who has seen too much." She answers, "I speak like one who has seen both sides." Outside, the wind moves across the Thames, rattling the window panes. The river seems to whisper in two languages at once, one of water, one of time. Smith clears his throat, his composure fragile. I should not have come, perhaps, he says. Your husband. He understands. She interrupts gently. Or tries to. He is a good man. I'm glad, Smith says. You deserve peace. She looks at him for a long moment. Peace, she repeats, the word soft as breath. It is a hard thing to find between worlds. They both fall silent again. The fire burns low. When at last she turns to leave, he bows once more, but she does not return the gesture. Instead, she steps closer and lays her hand upon his arm. You were the first stranger I ever met, she says. Now, you are the last I will remember. He looks at her, eyes glistening with something like regret. Then may you remember me kindly, he says. She shakes her head. No, she whispers. I will remember you truly. And, with that, she turns and walks away, her cloak trailing like a shadow. The door closes softly behind her, leaving Smith alone with the sound of the river and the echo of her voice. He stands there for a long time, staring into the fire. Perhaps he understands now what she had always known, that history is not written in battles or crowns, but in the quiet meetings between souls who never fully belong to the same world. Outside, the mist thickens. The Thames flows on, indifferent, eternal. Somewhere downstream, a bell tolls the hour. One more note in the long music of time. Soon, the river will call her again, not toward reunion, but farewell. And in that final crossing, two worlds will meet one last time beneath the grey sky of England. The morning she prepares to leave England is soft with mist. The Thames lies pale beneath a pewter sky, its surface neither river nor sea, but something between, as if undecided. Ships move slowly through the fog, their sails damp and ghost-like, their rigging whispering in the hush of dawn. Pocahontas stands on the deck of the vessel that will take her home, wrapped in a cloak that hides her fragile form. The air tastes of salt and coal. In the stillness, she can almost believe that Virginia is waiting just beyond the fog. It has been months since she last felt the warmth of her homeland's sun, months since she heard the rush of wind through pine. London had taken her through its corridors of splendor and smoke, its stone palaces and crowded streets, its curious eyes that followed her every move. Yet none of it could quiet the call within her. That steady rhythm, like a drum across distance, like the voice of home carried on wind. She had smiled in portraits, bowed in halls, spoken in a tongue not her own. But now, as she leans against the ship's rail, she feels the weight of all those days pressing inward, as if the air itself remembers what she has lost. Beside her, her husband, John Rolfe, arranges the last of their things. He speaks gently, his voice careful, as though words might startle her frail strength. Their son, Thomas, only a child, sleeps in a small cabin below deck. She listens to the sound of his breathing and closes her eyes. There are moments she imagines him grown, a bridge between her people and his father's, carrying both worlds in his veins. And yet, deep within her, she knows how fragile such bridges can be. They are built upon memory, upon longing, upon the trembling hope that love might outlast history. As the tide rises, her cough returns, soft at first, then sharp enough to bend her forward. The sickness has followed her since the winter's cold settled into her lungs. The physicians called it many names: fever, consumption, malaise. But to her, it feels less like disease than like the quiet unraveling of strength, as if her body is slowly returning to the earth from which it came. She clutches the edge of the rail, her breath shallow, her face turned toward the grey horizon. The ship's captain approaches. Hat in hand, he tells them they will sail with the evening tide once the river's current turns. Pocahontas nods faintly, but in her eyes there is something distant, an understanding that she may never see that tide. Her husband's hand finds hers, warm and trembling. He whispers that she will soon be home. Home. The word floats between them like incense. But which home does it mean? The England that has crowned her Lady Rebecca, baptized her in holy water, and draped her in silk, or the Seneca that still lives in her bones? The forests where her people move like shadows through dawn light. The river where she once bathed as a girl. The wind that carried her name in its native tongue. She remembers the way the English marveled at her. A princess of the New World. She had smiled through their curiosity, through the theatre of empire that turned her into symbol. Yet, in the quiet of night, she had prayed in both languages, to the God of her husband and to the great spirit of her ancestors. Perhaps both had listened. Perhaps both had led her here, to this place where river meets sea, where two currents merge and lose their names. As afternoon deepens, her fever worsens. The air grows thick, and her breaths come like short waves against a shore. A priest is called. The sound of prayer fills the cabin, words of forgiveness and release. John Rolfe kneels beside her, his tears falling silently onto her hand. She looks at him, and for a moment, her lips curve into a small, forgiving smile. "Tell them," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "Tell them I tried to live between both worlds." He nods, though the words catch in his throat. She turns her gaze toward the window, where the fog begins to lift. Through it, she sees a faint shimmer of light breaking across the Thames. It glows not like the sun, but like memory, soft, golden, almost kind. She imagines the river widening, flowing outward, carrying her back across the great ocean to the shores of her childhood. She sees her father's village, the smoke rising gently above the trees. She hears the songs sung at dusk, the laughter of children chasing fireflies. For a moment, she is there again, barefoot in the grass, the earth warm beneath her feet. Her breathing slows. The ship's timbers creak softly as if the vessel itself mourns. The priest closes his book. Outside, the tide begins to turn. When the final light fades, Pocahontas slips quietly away, not into darkness, but into stillness, the kind that exists before dawn, when the world holds its breath. The river carries her body toward Gravesend, the grey mouth of the Thames where ships linger before meeting the sea. There, beneath the church spire and the low cry of gulls, she is laid to rest. The records say she was 21. But time does not measure her life in years, only in distance. From river to river, forest to palace, she walked the line between worlds with the grace of someone who understood that bridges, once built, are rarely walked without cost. The English called her Rebecca, the baptized lady. Her people, long after, would remember her as Matoaka, the one who carried the dawn of a world she never asked to see. Centuries will pass. The river will darken. The sea will change. The church at Gravesend will stand through storm and fire, its stones holding the memory of her name. Travelers will visit, tracing her story in quiet wonder. Some will speak of love, others of empire, but all will feel the ache of something unfinished. The sense that she had not truly returned home, only crossed another threshold into legend. And perhaps that is what she became, not a symbol of conquest, nor a saint of conversion, but the silence between two voices, the calm between two tides. Her life was brief, but its echo endures. In the stories whispered by rivers, in the wind that still travels across both seas, the river still flows past Gravesend, murmuring her name beneath the tide. Beyond it lies the endless horizon, the beginning of another world and the quiet shadow of what remains. In that distance, the story does not end. It only drifts onward, like the current toward home. The river remembers, not in words, but in movement. The slow turning of water over silt, the soft murmur beneath the fog. The Thames, grey and steadfast, has carried centuries upon its back. Yet somewhere within its depths, it still holds the memory of a young woman who once looked upon its waters and longed for home. At Gravesend, the tide folds in and out with a rhythm that feels almost like breath. The church stands as it did then, its tower rising quietly above the harbour. Beneath its stones lies a name that time could never fully claim. Rebecca Rolfe to the English, but Pocahontas to the heart that once beat between two worlds. She has been gone for more than 400 years. Yet her story does not rest. It ripples outward, crossing oceans just as she once did. In Virginia, along the river she knew as Powhatan's child, the forests still hum with her presence. The James River, wide, brown, and winding, carries the same wind that once tangled her hair. Some nights, the fishermen say, you can almost hear laughter beneath the rustling reeds. The echo of a girl running barefoot through fields, her voice bright as morning. History would try to contain her. England wrote her into its chronicles as proof of empire. The princess who embraced civilization, the good Indian who bridged the new world and the old. The portrait they painted shows her in satin and lace. The faintest smile at the corners of her lips, yet behind those eyes lingers something untranslatable. A gaze that belongs not to any nation, but to the horizon itself. And her people, the Powhatan, remember differently. To them, she is Matoaka, the daughter who once brought peace to restless shores, whose kindness turned away the edge of the English sword. In their stories, she is not conquered nor remade. She is wind and water, a spirit that moves between worlds, unbound by the titles others gave her. Her son, Thomas Rolfe, grows to manhood far from his mother's resting place. Raised in England for much of his youth, he later returns to Virginia, to the land of her birth, where the rivers speak her name. The colony has changed by then. Jamestown's fragile palisades have hardened into brick. The forests have thinned, their edges bitten back by fields of tobacco. Yet Thomas walks those paths with a strange familiarity, as though the soil itself knows him. He visits his mother's people, seeking kinship across the distance of language and loss. Some receive him with warmth, others with silence. He carries both worlds within him, English in bearing, Powhatan in blood, and in his quiet existence, a lineage continues, threading its way through time. His descendants will live on in both nations, each generation whispering her name a little differently. Centuries pass, empires rise and fall, the rivers remain. The English poets of later years, those who never saw her face nor heard her voice, will write of her as symbol. They will call her gentle savage, noble convert, child of nature's dawn. They will carve her image into marble, print her story in books gilded with empire's glow. To them, she becomes myth, a story that reassures, a legend that softens conquest into romance. But the truth, as ever, lies between. Beneath the myth's gilding, there lingers the quiet shape of a real life, a girl who played among the trees of Werowocomoco, who spoke with strangers and wondered at their strange houses of wood and iron. A woman who loved, who feared, who walked into an unknown world because she believed peace was still possible. Her choices were never simple. Her legacy, never still. She is history's mirror. Each age sees in her what it needs to see. In the 19th century, America claims her anew. Painters render her in flowing robes, statues rise in her honor, and novels cast her as the gentle heart of the nation's beginnings. To a young country searching for origin stories, she becomes the mother of reconciliation, a figure to soothe the wounds of colonization with the balm of love and sacrifice. Yet even in stone she resists containment. The rivers refuse to let her be one thing. The Thames holds her sorrow, the farewell, the illness, the unfinished voyage. The James holds her laughter, the song of youth, the dance of freedom before history closed its gates. Between them lies an ocean of retelling, and still her spirit walks. In spring, when mist curls over the Thames, a passerby might pause and feel something, a softness in the air, a memory that does not quite belong to the present. Across the sea, where the James bends through Virginia, the same breeze stirs the reeds. 2 rivers, 2 worlds, and one name carried by both. Perhaps the earth remembers not her story, but her movement. The act of crossing, the courage of becoming both and neither. She is every traveller who has ever stood between homes, every voice lost in translation, every bridge that still trembles between us and them. And somewhere, beyond the words and portraits, she remains simply Pocahontas, the girl who once listened to the rivers and trusted that peace could be made from difference. In the silence of evening, the Thames laps softly against its banks. The church bells of Gravesend ring the same tones they did that day long ago. In Virginia, the wind rustles through sycamore and willow. The sound is almost the same. A language older than time, one she once knew by heart. It is not difficult to imagine her still there, unseen, walking the edge where land meets water, watching the world she bridged unfold in endless circles. Perhaps, if history could dream, it would dream of her this way, free once more, running along the river's edge, hair wild in the wind, the scent of rain on her skin. Not as a princess, nor as a convert, nor as a myth, but as herself. The river remembers, and through it, we remember too. Not the legend that empire built, but the life that still breathes beneath it. For the past, like the tide, never truly recedes. It only returns in new shapes, new voices, new songs. So long as water moves and stories are told, Pocahontas remains, not fixed in marble or ink, but flowing from mouth to mouth, from shore to shore. The Thames turns once more toward the sea, carrying her story into open water. Somewhere across the world, another river answers, whispering back her name. And between them, in that eternal echo, her spirit drifts forever unbound. And so, as the night settles around us, the story of Pocahontas drifts to a close. Not with a grand curtain, but with a hush. Her world, once wild with the song of the river and the rustle of cedar trees, now lingers in the quiet between heartbeats. She was more than a tale told by conquerors, more than a figure carved into history's marble. She was a bridge of breath and kindness, fleeting, fragile, but enough to remind us that even in the meeting of worlds, gentleness can endure. If you listen closely, you can still hear her name in the wind, soft and unclaimed. A reminder that every story, no matter how rewritten, carries a pulse that refuses to fade. And so the candle of that night burns quietly in time, its light trembling across centuries to find you here, listening in the dark. Thank you for sharing this moment of stillness with me tonight. It's a tender thing, this act of listening, reaching across time to hold the echo of another life in your hands. In this little corner of the universe, we honor those who walked before us, not as myths, but as mirrors of our own yearning to belong, to forgive, to be remembered with kindness. Now, let the story loosen its hold. Let your breathing fall in rhythm with the tide of the night. There is nothing more to understand, nothing left to do, only to rest. May your dreams carry you gently through the river of sleep, where the past hums softly and tomorrow waits without hurry. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in, one story at a time. If this brought you peace, you are always welcome to return, to sit once more by the quiet flame and listen as history whispers itself back to sleep. Until next time, good night, and may the echoes of the old world keep you warm.